Hi, welcome to our very first podcast titled Love, Growth, and Narratives. We have been talking about doing this podcast for a very long time as a couple, and now we are finally getting it going. I'm Tiffany.
I'm Freddie, and I really think that you will enjoy the content, things that we have to talk about, and we're really excited to get this going.
Yes, I've been wanting to do this for a long time, even before I met Freddie, but being together inspires me to want to have these conversations, actually share these conversations that we typically have together all the time. And we just like to bring other people in on our conversation.
Yeah, we've had, because of what's happened in our individual lives and how we came together, the way we approach our relationship has become very interesting, and it's something that we're very proud of and something that we want to share with others.
Hopefully everyone will be able to walk away with something from this podcast, either something you agree with or something that you want to bring back to your community and talk further about it. We hope to just open up and get conversations going that maybe people sometimes aren't comfortable having.
Yeah, it's important to know that, we're doing this as learners, as lifelong learners. And so we're always interested in any diverse opinions. If anyone sees as something that we say could be strengthened or is just way off, we'd love to hear it, and we'd love to learn from others.
So we're excited, and we hope that you're excited too. We wanted to give a little bit of background about who we are as individuals. Again, I'm Tiffany. I'm 54 years old. I identify as a Black woman. I'm straight. I am originally from New York, but I've been transplanted in Los Angeles for quite some years. I'm a teacher. I'm an only child. I'm a daughter to my mom. My family is small. I do have a cousin who lives out here, and I have extended cousins, but I don't really know a lot of the family in New York. I would consider myself liberal, but not in the way that the word has been used to be sort of a derogatory term. I believe in love. I like music, art. I believe in getting to know lots of different people from lots of different cultures. That's how I grew up. And that's what I'm used to. So I'm very familiar with a lot of different types of people, and I'm comfortable around a lot of different types of people. What else? I've never been married. I don't have any children of my own, although I consider my students children, and I now have a stepson to be, and also some other older adult stepchildren. What else about me? I'm an introvert. Not everyone believes that, but I am. My battery goes down pretty quickly if I'm talking too much with people or listening too much. I just need a break and I need to recharge. But I do enjoy people. I definitely consider myself a humanitarian. I love all things people. I love to hear stories and learn about people in the past. I think that I'm a very loyal person, sometimes at a fault. I'm very helpful and giving and kind, again, also sometimes at a fault, but I'm working on that. I like scrolling on social media. That's a way that I kind of escape, something that I love to do. I love learning about new things. While I know that social media can, be a negative thing, I found it to be very positive, learning about, the history of Black people or other cultures as well that I would have probably never found out. I never found out for sure as a student. So I appreciate that. I appreciate learning about new things and new people, and it helps me grow new ideas, new ways of doing things. I believe desperately in love. Thank goodness that I do, because I wouldn't be where I am today, which we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. I am kind of the type of person who is, I would say I'm an empath. And so I'm always looking and feeling and noticing everything about everyone. And I constantly try to help and fix things. And I'm getting better at allowing people to do that for me. I used to be extremely shy when I was younger. And over the years, I've been able to open up more and been more confident about sharing who I am and my story especially through social media. It's been easier to do it that way. I have a story where I've gone up and down through weight loss. So that's been a struggle. And that's kind of how I got a pretty good following on social media from a weight loss that I had some years ago. I'm excited to be doing this podcast. I'm excited about, where it will take us, the conversations that we'll have, the kind of, the learning that I'll do before I come on and say something. So I just am looking to do something new and different with my life. And this is one of the ways that I'm going to express myself.
And I'm Freddie. I'm originally from the East Coast. I've been out here in Los Angeles for the past 5.5 years, moving out here from Maryland. But in terms of my background, well, first off, I'm 52 years old. I'll be 53 in September. But I grew up in majority Black, majority white, and very diverse neighborhoods. We moved a lot growing up, and so I lived in so different neighborhoods, and it helped me to learn how different people are, and it also really informed a lot of my opinions and helped me to understand that we're really not that different just based on how we look or the part of the country that we grow up in. I was not a very good student in school, and that really put a lot of my options after high school. It minimized my options. I ended up going into the Army. I was in Army intelligence, starting off from 17 years old, having to get parental consent to even join the military. From there, I did 6 years, got out and was in telecommunications for a long time, from climbing poles to central office to fiber optics, for the course of almost 20 years. From there, I went into the federal government, the Department of Defense, where I was in cybersecurity. I'm still in cybersecurity. In fact, I left the federal government about 4 months after I moved out here to Los Angeles, which was something that I'd wanted to live out here for a long time because I wanted to kind of slow down a bit. I was in a situation where I felt like I was working myself into an early grave, and then a good friend of mine committed suicide because of a lot of his home stress and work stress. And when that happened back in 2017, that really started me thinking that I need to start looking more towards living more and not just working all the time. So other than that, I'm a lifelong learner. I just care about learning new things. I don't marry my ideas. You've probably heard that before. I date my ideas, and so because of that, when someone comes to me with the superior argument and superior evidence, I have no problem changing my mind. I have no problem shifting my focus. And so that's kind of what brought me into who I am. I'm also twice divorced. My first marriage was to a high school sweetheart, and we were married for 10 years. We had 2 kids together who were in their mid-20s at this point, and I'm still very close to. And I was married for 13 years. It was my second marriage. And that's where my youngest son comes from. He's 15, almost 16, and almost 30, at least in his own mind. But we'll get more into a lot of this as time progresses. But I also believe in love, even with all of my failures. And really, it's because of my failures, because I've tried to figure out what I can do better, because I am just determined to do this correctly one of these days. And so, but we'll talk more about this as time progresses.
It's interesting how we met, yet not uncommon. We met online on an app called Hinge.
In case we want to talk about our individual journeys getting to love. How did you get there, Tiffany?
I'm not sure. I think I've always been a romantic. I think that I got that from my mom. She's very romantic, very fantasy. I have always wanted to be in love, to fall in love. I felt like everything in my life I got that I wanted except for love. That was taking a really long time to find me and for me to find as well. And I think I was trying to create it in a lot of my past relationships. And when I say created, I was trying to get that person to be who I wanted them to be.
Yeah, I know with me, a lot of it goes back to childhood because I never felt like the good looking guy. I always kind of felt like, I was a decent looking guy on a good day with a nice outfit and a haircut. And so I never felt, I didn't feel ugly.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't feel like women wanted me. I felt like I was presentable, whereas a woman didn't mind being with me, but I never felt like, like she had to worry about her girlfriend wanting to steal me. I don't think they ever felt threatened in that way. And so for me, because of that, I was a pleaser. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a pleaser in any other part of my life except with my woman. And the problem is that I took it way too far where I would lose myself in a relationship and then be resentful because of the fact that I lost myself, which ended up being my own fault. Did you have anything like that?
You're reminding me of something. A family member who will go nameless at this point said to me, I love you, but I don't like you. And at the time I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew it was hurtful and it stuck with me for a very long time, well into adulthood. And I think I was trying to search and trying to create a situation where a person both liked and loved me. And I didn't know, I wasn't really sure what that meant, but I know I wanted both of them. And I was forcing it and pushing it. And similar to you, growing up, I didn't feel that I was the top chosen girl. I was pretty for a dark-skinned girl. It was always, I was pretty, but whoever I hung out with was prettier, all the way going back to kindergarten. I remember I had a crush on a boy named Steven, and he liked my friend who looked, opposite of me. And so that stuck with me too for a long time. It sounds crazy, but it did. And that kind of repeated itself.
Yeah.
And I tended to date people who just weren't available. Maybe I did that on purpose as a way to kind of, control rejection in a weird kind of way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to break out of that.
Yeah.
It took me all the way to my late 40s, to be honest with you. And I think also I knew that I was let me go back a little bit further. Based on some things I saw in the relationships in my family, I knew what I didn't want. And there was a point in my life where I wanted to be in control. If I was going to be in a relationship, I was going to be in control. And so I dated down, so to speak, not to knock anyone, but I kind of did. And then I said, wait, I don't want this. I want someone who's more my equal. And so I started to change my thought process. But I knew that I wanted a partner who was going to be like an equal in the sense of, I'm not less than because I'm a woman. He's not more than because he's a man. And it's kind of hard to find in this society. And I would say actually it's even a little bit harder to find our culture in my experience. And so I held out for that though, because I really didn't see that in my family. I didn't see, my grandfather was really was probably the best example I saw of a relationship and, a man. And he wasn't that type, even though my grandmother stayed home and took care of the kids. She didn't have less power power
Right.
in the relationship because of that. He still cooked. On the weekend, he did things with the kids. It wasn't like, my job is just to bring home money and that's it, And I knew that I wanted someone in my life who I felt equal with, but I just had a hard time, finding that person.
Yeah. I mean, like a lot of it was, and we get these things from our upbringing. My father told me my whole life, he said, a man will never be happy until he finds the woman that he doesn't deserve. And so what I did with a lot of my past relationships was I put the woman on a pedestal. And I was absolutely a pleaser. And the problem is I would absolutely lose myself. I didn't have hobbies. I didn't have things that I enjoyed doing. I didn't set any boundaries. And then, you start going down the road and you're always doing what the other person wants to do. And then you get upset. It's like, why are you never doing what I want to do? And then come to realize, well, you're not doing what I want to do because I never told you what I wanted to do.
Right.
And so, going through that and even through my marriages, that was something that I didn't realize up until a few years ago that I was actually doing, because after my second marriage, when I felt, okay, now I have time to do things, to have hobbies, I had no idea what I liked doing. I honestly had no idea what I wanted to do. So that was difficult. How did you deal between relationships?
I think that I was similar to you, where I didn't have those boundaries and didn't think about what I really wanted. I was just trying so hard to create love in that relationship by doing things that I thought would make that person fall in love with me.
Yeah.
Some of it was things I wanted to do. Some of it was what I thought they wanted. But really, a lot of those people, specifically the last long-term relationship I had, didn't want me, didn't want what I wanted. It was more of a gimmick. It was, but I didn't accept that. I thought that that's what a relationship was. You had to appease that other person and get them to fall in love with you. That was something I was doing, right? That's what we're taught as women. Like, think like a man, act like a lady, and all this other stuff. Like, there are all these books, the rules. I read them all. Like, all these things you're supposed to do to get the guy to love you. Act like this, do this, think like that. Don't be his piece, blah, blah, what all the little sayings are. And I really tried hard to do and be that person, but with people who didn't want what I wanted. And that's, I think, why I wasted so much time with so many people. I mean, I've met some great people along the way and learned some lessons, but I spent too much time with people who didn't want to spend time with me, or who were not, maybe they did care about me, but they just weren't emotionally available.
Yeah.
I think that's an issue that a lot of men and women have, particularly men.
Yeah.
And I felt that, well, it's my job to make them want me, to make them be more emotionally available. Like, there was something I could do or say to cause them to do that. And I realized that was wrong, to be trying to change someone and trying to get them to be a certain way and act a certain way and think a certain way. It's not going to work. Absolutely. So speaking of growth, I want us to define what growth means to us. I think it's important to do that because another thing that you taught me, which I had to grow in, is that, a dictionary only defines a word and how it's used in that time frame. I mean, obviously the word growth is not going to change a ton, over the years or the decades or generations, but it really matters how you kind of define it for yourself, especially when you're in a conversation with someone. It's important to talk about how you define those words. And that way, when you have this conversation, kind of maybe be more in the same space. So
if I can, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if I can just speak on that real quick. What I've always said, and I get into this argument with my father all the time, dictionaries are not authoritative sources. They're not. The purpose of a dictionary is to document common usage of a word. It doesn't define a word. It just documents the common usage of a word. And as we see with a lot of our words have changed over the past 15, 20 years. And so as we're discussing things, it's critical to know what your definition of that word is, so that we're talking about it the same way.
Right. Yep. Exactly. I agree with you. So how would you define growth?
For me, growth would be the ability to improve. I mean, I don't know. I can't go much deeper than that. The ability to prove, the ability to change in a way that improves who you are as a person, improves your relationship, improves whatever you feel is lacking.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Like, growth for me is basically just doing something different than I'm used to doing, being outside the box, thinking outside the box. Sometimes growth is letting go of something. Sometimes growth is grasping on to something. It could be a belief. It could be a person. It could be an item.
Yes.
Growth is hard. It's messy. It's slow. It can be fast depending on what it is. There's so many different components to growth. And I think that I've had to grow quite a bit in the last almost 3 years we've been together, but especially in the last year. I've had to grow in many ways in different areas of my life. And for a while, I stayed away from growth because I resisted it, or I had a difficult time with it. You're forced to grow. You're going to grow at some point, whether you want to or not. But I think in my childhood, I moved so many times and went to several different schools. I think I went to like 7 different schools before middle school, 7 different elementary schools.
Yeah.
I just wanted things to stay the same. I needed something to be familiar, something I could rely on. I needed to see a pattern. But I know that staying in that one space doesn't help me as a person in a more broader sense. So I think I'm now ready to grow more than I was before, but still resist it, and growing in every area of my life. I think there were certain areas I was willing to grow, like, my job and career and, school, education, all that kind of stuff. But certain areas I was not willing to grow, and now I am.
It's interesting you say that about having moved around a lot, because I also moved around a lot as a child. There were some times we would move so often that we wouldn't even unpack. And so because of that, there was constant change. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because of that or just something within my personality, I love change. I enjoy change, which is sometimes bad because sometimes something I could be doing might be right. And I love change. And so that it's interesting how people can have a similar challenge in childhood, but then grow out of it 2 totally different ways. But one of the other things I wanted to talk about when it comes to growth is, yes, and it is difficult, but people get to a certain point in their lives or their careers where they feel like, okay, I'm done growing. And I just don't understand that. I don't understand how, if you're still alive, you're not still trying to figure out a way to become better. It's like, well, then what's the point? I just don't get it. I'm sorry.
I agree with you. I think, though, sometimes in certain areas, you're like, I'm going to stop here. I'm not going to keep giving myself more challenges and new things because there's another area that I need to focus on. It's really hard to grow in everything at the same time.
Yes, it is.
It's a challenge. And sometimes people have to put things in a box and say, okay, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing in this box because I'm going to try to grow over here in this other box. And we just have to give people grace. And
that's still growth. And I'm not saying this like I'm this great change agent that I just make these wonderful, huge leaps as a person, because I don't. I have the same difficulties as everyone else. I think one of the differences is, and a lot of it is because I'm just an extremely curious person.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm so curious about things, I learn things that they require me to think about my own thought processes, my own values, my own opinions and ideas. And so just in that, being curious kind of forces me, even though there are things that I know I need to do that I'm not excited about doing because I know it's going to be hard. But it's like, what are we here for?
Right. I think it's important too to try not to. I mean, You want to help people grow. If you see somebody stagnant, you want to give support or give advice. But it's also important to note that we may not understand how much they're growing. Like growth for them may have been like showering that day, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so growth is different for different people at different stages in their life. And I understand that more than I think I ever did after everything that has happened in the last, we need to say year, really the last 6 months. That growth can be very tiny.
Yes.
It can be tedious. Something you have to work on some of it you have to work on every day, and some of it life throws itself at you, and you have to grow. You have no choice.
Yeah.
But it's different for different people. But at the end, it is about hopefully becoming a better person at the end of the day.
And I tell you, just as an example, and this is one of the things that I've just never forgotten, was I always felt like I needed to be the smart person in the room. And I was in telecom for about 20 years, and a good bit of that was spent on the fiber optic side of communications. And I just loved it. But I wanted to grow into management. And I told my boss, I said, I want to figure out how I can get into management. And he actually promoted me quicker than I realized. So it kind of threw me. And in being a manager, as opposed to being a technology person, we were the tier 3 for a worldwide telecommunications company, which means that when no one else could fix it, we had to be able to fix it. And I loved that life. So when I got into management, and now I'm looking at people's schedules and vacations and doing evaluations and bringing in contractors and all this kind of stuff, it was so new to me because it's something I'd never done. Mm-hmm. And what I ended up doing was I started falling back into my old ways, and I would find ways to work trouble tickets that really I shouldn't have. I should have passed them on to someone else, but I would tell myself, oh, I'm just going to do this real quick. Just so I can keep my skills sharp, I want to do this real quick. And I was a poor manager. And I didn't realize it until I had switched jobs and kind of looked backward that, wow, I was a horrible manager because I wasn't able to, I didn't force myself out of my comfort zone into growth so that I could become a good manager. So I really messed that one up. And so when I got into the government and got back into positions of leadership, I forced myself away from a lot of the stuff that I enjoyed, that was my comfort zone, which is the technology, and forced myself into managing people and taking my time to take care of my staff and making sure they have everything they need and that they were taken care of. But that was a tough one for me. What about you?
When I first started into the workforce in a career, I was in the fashion industry, and I felt I had to work extremely hard to prove myself as someone who was young, who at the time was not yet college educated, who was Black. And I just worked myself to death in that field, and that continued on when I moved into teaching. I thought that's what I needed to do, and some parts of me still feels that that's what I needed to do. But now at this point in my life, I'm realizing I don't have the energy or the desire to put as much time as I did before. Even though I feel it's really important, this is really going against basically my morals, to be honest with you. But I just can't do it. I just can't. I'm older. I'm going into menopause. I have this family. The family has some medical issues that are needing, multiple people. There's a child involved. There's just so much going on, my own health, that I cannot put the kind of work into my job that I used to before. And for that, it takes growth, because I feel guilty. I don't feel like I'm as good as a teacher. I'm not sure I connected as much this year with my students, which is mostly probably because I was gone for 3 months, but I had to grow and let myself feel uncomfortable in not doing what I've always done in terms of my job, just putting that 1,000%, proving that I'm just as good as anybody else, trying to tear down stereotypes and all that. Feeling like my motto for a long time was like, you have to change the world. I used to write that all the time. I used to write Tiffany the Great changes the world. I used to write that over and over and over when I was younger. And I had it in my mind, that is my job, to change the world. And I'm going to do it through teaching. But I think that I also lost myself doing that. And that took a lot of growth. I think the first time that I decided to make a change and grow at work was when it was after I had lost a lot of weight, and I was I was really in the fitness world. I had this huge following. I mean, huge for me. It wasn't $1 million followers, but it was up there. And I thought I was going to leave, education. I was going to go be this trainer, but then I developed these health problems, and I knew I still needed my insurance. So I was like, how am I going to get my mind back from Miss Fitness back to being a teacher? I have to do this for the long haul. And I told myself, well, I'm going to incorporate social justice in everything that I do. That was growth for me. And I went away from some of the other things that I was pushing in class to focus on that. And that actually really helped me grow. It helped me grow as a person. It helped me actually learn more because I had to know what I was talking about. I had to get more history. It was a lot of growth in that moment. And now fast forward to where I am today. I don't have the time to spend to do all of that research and all of that work and buy all of those books and all the things that I do. So once again, I'm finding myself having to grow. Like, how can I still be a good, effective teacher and have my family in balance? I know you don't like that word, but balance, like what's going on outside of work. It's hard. Yeah. It's challenging.
Absolutely.
I feel guilty. I feel like something's missing. But I'm going to have to sit in that because, as my therapist says, which going to therapists, I've been doing that off and on for years, but I think this is one of the best therapists I've been with lately. He's really like, just because you're uncomfortable or you feel guilty doesn't mean it's wrong.
That's right.
And that takes growth right there, because I'm used to reacting to how I feel. I'm a Pisces, and I'm used to and a woman, I'm used to reacting to how I feel. So that's a big challenge for me to sit in that uncomfortable feeling.
Yes.
That takes a ton of growth.
Yeah. The in-group, out-group dynamic. And it is a cognitive bias, and it's something that, it's rather primal for humans being social animals, is that we have a need to belong to a family, to a community, to a group of people who share the same ideals. One of the most popular in-group, out-group type of examples would be Democrats and Republicans. As some people, the way they grew up, the neighborhood they grew up, the people that they grew up, they kind of adopted, a party, be it Democrat or Republican. And what they end up doing is you end up giving a break to those within the party that you like when they do something wrong, but those in the opposite party, they get no grace. And so you'll see, especially if any of you watched the debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, how the analysis afterwards went from, if you're a Democrat, you'd say, well, Joe Biden had a bad performance, and he also had a cold, which probably contributed to him having a bad performance. However, that guy over there, Donald Trump, he's an existential threat, and he's a liar, and we have to get rid of him. Now, if you're on the Republican side, your thought process will probably be the opposite. You'll say, well, we know what Donald Trump can do, what he did when he was in office, and even though we may not like some of the stuff he says, the things that he did in office we approve of, as opposed to with Biden, where we just think that he's asleep at the switch, and we need to really get rid of him because who knows who's actually running the country. And so when you look at these in-group, out-group dynamics, that's kind of what we're talking about.
Okay, so let me just be clear. In my mind, what you're saying is that it's basically these teams, these camps, these groups, whatever you want to
tribes,
tribes. No disrespect to Native Americans, that you tend to fall into one particular group and you feel a sense of belonging when you're in that group, and
Yes.
you feel dedicated to that group.
Yes.
And when something happens within that group, you tend to make excuses for it, especially if you're talking to someone on the other side.
Absolutely.
You may notice, you may feel that something was wrong, but you don't want to appear like you're putting down the group that you support,
Yes.
right? And the group on the outside is going to do the same thing on the opposite. And what we're kind of asking people to do today, and something that I'm requiring of myself because I'm working on this, I'm new at this, is to be more of a critical thinker and really think about what information I'm evaluating and be able to say what I agree with and what I don't agree with. And whatever that statement is, it doesn't mean that suddenly I'm against my own team or that I'm for the other team, but that I'm just evaluating that particular piece of information to better analyze things.
Yeah, and I think that's important, especially when you're in conversations. And that's why, for me, I try to admit during conversations where people don't necessarily agree with me, I try to admit my own biases, because of the fact that I don't want to fall into that trap of, well, this guy was on my side or was on my team or in my tribe, and so, or I'm going to excuse everything they do, or this person, they're in the other tribe, so everything they do, it has to be horrible. And so I think, first off, admitting to yourself that you have these biases, and at an elemental level, they're not bad to have a group that you care about and a group that you want to do well. Where it gets difficult is how much of a pass you give to your side, as well as how you vilify the other side, especially sometimes when the other side, they're just people just like that. Where else have you seen that?
I've seen it, and I think we're going to discuss this tonight in the Black community.
Absolutely.
Where me personally, I grew up not feeling, in my younger years, I'm going to say 0 to good 15, 20, I didn't feel accepted by my own group, quote unquote, Black people, because of the way that I spoke or the way I carried myself or even my skin color. And I myself didn't want to be a part of that group for a long time, but I had no choice, right? So I was associating everything with something being negative as a part of that group because of the way that I showed up as a Black person wasn't considered Black enough.
Yes.
And so I went with that for a long time. It created for me some stereotypes against my own group, making them larger than life. And it caused me to have certain friendships, which is it's nothing wrong with having friends with all different backgrounds. I love my friends to death, but I do also feel that I pushed myself away from my own group because I was scared to talk and be teased because of the way that I spoke. Even when I taught 6th grade, the students told me that I talked white, and I had a really hard time with that. That I'm getting it from kids, I'm getting it from adults, I'm getting it from peers. That was the only way I knew to talk, and everyone in my family spoke, and everyone on my Black neighborhood street in New York spoke that same way. So it wasn't until I stepped outside of that that I was seen as being bougie. I think I've been called bougie many, many times in life when I was young. And at that time, it meant more like you think you're better than other Black people.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of like a badge of honor. Yeah, I'm bougie. I like fine dining and luxury and all of that. But growing up, it was, you think you're better.